Great, so welcome everybody and coming to join us despite our technical glitches at the start of the webinar, which is the last thing you need. So we've got up till 2 o'clock today. My name's Chris Mackay, so I work for an organisation called Growing Circles. We're leading the public consultation on the final draft of the local nature recovery strategy for South Yorkshire. In terms of the structure of the session, this is a specific session for transport professionals. We are using this to get information together to take back to a group at the Mayoral Combined Authority next week, and really this is kind of a chance for this group of colleagues to help shape that final version. So I'm going to talk at you a bit. I'm going to show you kind of a film. I'll talk you through the strategy, and then although it might have been plugged as a webinar, we're actually going to ask lots of your opinions as well. So hopefully we'll get into some discussion later. I will make a start and share my screen. Bear with me. Hopefully this will now work. Let's do that. And there we go. Give me a quick thumbs up if you can see that. Great. So what we wanted to explore through this kind of specific session is, what's the role that transport can play in local nature recovery? And this works. So a little bit about the nature recovery strategy. So what is it? So all areas around the country will have a local nature recovery strategy. And this is our plan for restoring and improving wildlife habitat and green spaces. The strategy for South Yorkshire covers Barnsley, Doncaster, Rotherham and Sheffield. It also covers part of the Peak District. It's been developed with lots of input. So there's kind of a working group, a steering group, over 1,800 people have fed into its development so far. We hope we've really captured that in the final strategy. But now we're taking that final draft out to consultation before it gets published and put into action later this year. And I suppose for the public consultation, we have a few aims. So one is to raise awareness, to get people to know there is such a thing as a strategy. The other is to find out whether we've got it right. And the third and most important one really is, let's start thinking about how we deliver it. So if the strategy is about trying to get 30% of land and water in good condition for nature by 2030, we're already in 2026 and we're on about 6%. So how do we really kind of ramp up nature recovery of the country? But natural habitats aren't just beautiful, they're really essential. So nature provides the food we eat, the water we drink, medicines we rely on. And I think all of us, as time goes on, become more and more aware of just how important healthy ecosystems are for climate, for food, and for everything that kind of keeps us alive on a planet flying through the universe. So we can accept that nature is kind of fundamental to health and well-being, and that access to green space has a really strong impact on health and well-being. And one of the reasons that South Yorkshire is becoming an ever more popular place to live is because it's so green and so beautiful. So that aside, more than half of our habitats are in poor condition. We see increasing risks of flood, extreme heat, development and land use changes are fragmenting nature. So really the cost of doing nothing is too high, and now is the time that we need to act. So the strategy is a legal document. It's a framework that we put into place. It's one of 48 strategies covering the whole of England. Some of this I mentioned before, but it's been developed through expert input and previous public consultation, particularly looking to identify, where nature recovery will have the greatest impact, whether that's farmland or post-industrial landscapes. Within the website, if you've had time to look around, there's mapped areas, so you can look at the map and play with that to see what areas are marked for nature recovery and add comments. The the mapped areas, it's not a legal designation, so it doesn't mean that you have to change the use of that land, but having this strategy in place and the map in place can help us guide good decision making in the future. The strategy can also guide planning decisions, and it can help direct investment, and particularly as more development is more connected to nature recovery through things like biodiversity net gain. What we want is for people to see delivery of the strategy as a shared responsibility, and that's from landowners to communities, and also that it's a living plan that will evolve over time. So in terms of what makes our landscape special, I won't go into all of these in detail, but this kind of just highlights some of the really important natural landscape that we have, and the things that we're keen to protect and enhance and expand through good nature recovery. Okay. So the overarching priorities for nature recovery are around bringing nature closer to people, especially in communities where access to green space is limited, building partnerships. Delivery of the strategy is going to need the whole system to work really well together. Part of our strategy is to get people involved, creating opportunities for communities. We want to tackle invasive species, improve green spaces, help people to understand nature, reducing the damage to habitats caused by visitors. We want to build climate resilience, and we want to protect and connect habitats. So there are kind of 4 habitat-based priorities for nature recovery. So this is how we've kind of grouped landscapes together. So one is kind of grassland and heathland. And the focus there is, supporting a range of rare plants and animals, managing flood risk and storing carbon. So we're doing some specific work with farmers in the region as part of this consultation as well. Urban nature is really important in South Yorkshire, and we have some, as I'm sure you will know as transport professionals, some really exciting and interesting approaches to how nature can sit alongside transport and in urban environments in the region. Woodland and trees, and particularly our ancient woodland, is really important to us. And then watercourses, water bodies and wetlands are all vital. And you'll recognise that a lot of these are the things that connect our landscapes together. So in terms of supporting wildlife we love, there is also kind of a priority species list, which covers birds, plants, insects, mammals and reptiles. That can be found kind of in the back of the strategy if you look around on the website with a full list. And there's also some particular species that have been lost from the area, but that we hope you could bring back and return. So that includes the beaver, which often gets lots of people excited, pine martens, hazel dormouse. There's some flowering plants there, and also kind of freshwater pearl mollusk. So again, this detail is all in the back of in and around the strategy if you want to explore it more on the website. In terms of why we wanted a kind of a specific conversation around transport, transport networks are some of the largest connected landscapes in South Yorkshire, as you will well know. So, roads, railways, cycle routes, walking routes, they all influence how nature functions across the region. So transport can be a barrier to wildlife, but it can also be a connector and an enabler. It can contribute to flood resilience and improved quality in healthy places. So we see that the transport sector has a really important role to play within the strategy, and we're really keen to hear your views about how we bring that forward into delivery. So it doesn't have kind of its own chapter. There isn't a transport chapter, but as you will know, it runs through the other, like quite a few of the other chapters that we've mentioned. So we think, connectivity is one of the strongest themes there. So how does nature connect across landscapes, but also how do we connect people to nature? So the Wildlife Trust, for example, has a target of trying to get 1 in 4 people taking action for nature. That's kind of seen as a tipping point. If you can get 25% of people to care about nature, then suddenly you can really start driving movements of change. but if people can't get to nature, then they're less likely to care about it. So the strategy talks about green infrastructure. It also talks about the role transport has in delivering nature-based solutions, a strong emphasis on urban nature, because we do have a lot of grey space within our region, and also thinking about partnerships. So how do we build relationships between local authorities, transport operators, Network Rail, national highways, etc. So in terms of things in practice, in a moment, I'm going to come, as we come back into the room together, I'll ask us to think about some great examples and places where we might take inspiration. But in practice, we, delivering nature recovery could mean, changing how we manage roadside verges so they become richer habitats. Rotherham did some fantastic work in that in the past, of having, like wildflower verges around many of its roads. We've also got the Greater Green Scheme in Sheffield. It could be thinking about green bridges, wildlife crossings, sustainable drainage and planting into transport schemes. It could mean designing active travel routes that enable people but also nature to connect. Or is it just even thinking about how we use routine maintenance and renewal programs as opportunities to improve biodiversity? So I think it's probably good that none of these are generally new ideas, because of the scale of the challenge. We actually want to think of things that we can do quite quickly and at pace to really impact nature recovery. And as we move into finalising the strategy and delivering it, it's kind of really starting to think about what's our priorities for quick wins and action. So I'm going to come off share and back into the room. Have people had time to review the strategy? Have people looked at it before the session? Yeah. So should we start with just some general reflections then? Do people have any questions about the strategy? And for those who've had time to get into it, how did you kind of respond to it initially? How did it land? Feel free to come off mic. Yes, Tim, well done.
Thank you. I haven't had time to read the whole strategy as yet, but I was working my way through the website and appreciate the efforts that have gone into putting the stuff together and supportive of it. But as a National Park Authority, I think you'd expect that. Yeah. Obviously part of the South Yorkshire area falls within the National Park, and the things that we can do within the South Yorkshire area is to the benefit of the whole park.
Yeah. So you're here from the National Park. We've got several colleagues here from the Mayoral Combined Authority. Heather, yeah. Yeah, thanks for coming, Cara. So Cara's down in Essex.
Disappear. Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you. See you later.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, Cara joined us from Essex. We were having a little chat before we came in. Heather, where are you from? Are you able to come in or?
Yes, I work for National Highways. I'm on their environment team for Yorkshire and the North East region. I unfortunately haven't had time yet to review the strategy, but it is on my to-do list before the end of this week.
Yeah, I mean, in general, and what we've seen in the kind of public consultation response so far is that people are very supportive. It's hard to object strongly to the idea of nature recovery, I should think. Where do we draw inspiration from in the region? Do you want to come in, Claire?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of my concerns about the strategy, is there is very little to object to it. It all feels great, doesn't it? It feels good. But what I'm not feeling is how is that going to influence our decision making, particularly within the MCA? So by the time transport schemes get to my desk, most of the decisions around them are made. I put them into contract and I award the funding.
Yeah.
but where will the strategy sit in that hierarchy of decision making so that it can lean on the levers that the MCA has to actually make effective change and to influence decision making?
And is that a question that you feel able to answer? Like if I asked that question back to you in your role, what do you think, where does it need to sit so that it really does drive change?
It needs to be a consideration when business cases are coming forward at the early stage, at the strategic case of business cases, but it needs to be more than just, yes, we read the local nature and recovery strategy, tick, if it's actually going to make any meaningful change. So there's often tensions in the decisions that are made around transport schemes naturally, or sometimes there's opportunities that you might want to take, but they cost more, or they have maintenance implications longer term that might make them not attractive. When we're just looking at a business case in terms of its value for money, it would be really helpful to be able to turn the local nature recovery strategy into terminology that matches with that value for money language, so we can start to measure it against other costs and benefits that we might be looking for out of a scheme, so it's got a fighting chance of influencing the options when we're at the long listing of projects. What option are we going to go for? Oh no, that's going to cost lots, let's forget that. How do we make sure that we can add weight, I suppose would be my concern, to the aspirations in the document, and start to turn it into real things that we can do and continue to do, and to help support decision making. For example, if we have an active travel scheme that is suggested, but the route necessitates cutting down some mature trees, how are we going to start to measure the different values involved in those two proposals, and where does the LNRS sit in helping us make that decision?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, isn't it? So how do you demonstrate the value of nature, and then how do you create a framework that allows decisions to be made fairly? Heather, I wonder from the highway side, because there's nationally infrastructure is generally doing more to contribute to nature recovery, and think about it. Did you have any reflections on Claire's point, I wonder?
Not anything that we're not already currently trying to do, really. So we do have schemes where we try and increase biodiversity in the region anyway. Normally within national highways land ownership, try and create green corridors. There is the very distant future potential of creating green bridges. There has recently been a green bridge created by National Highways down in the southern region of the country. I think it connects, I believe it's on the A3. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, just because I'm purely based in Yorkshire and North East. But I've spoken with my colleague who was heavily involved with that, and it was a multi-million-pound green bridge, which also incorporated public right-of-way, but it's reconnected habitats for sand lizards. They've also found that, the green bridge opened in May this year, and they found that the sand lizards are already starting to use it, along with bats, badgers, and other larger fauna as well, such as like deer and foxes. But it's proven to be successful, and doing what it was intended to do. And I've been told that there may be in the future potential to do that in other areas, providing that we can provide justification for money, obviously, because we're a public funded body. We have to be seen to be doing things that are good value for money. So it's sort of knowing where to strategically place large structures like that.
And do you, I suppose, and you may well not know the answer, but I suppose that question about how do you attach a value to nature in those schemes? You said have you got measures that you use to justify?
So currently the only sort of measurement we have is biodiversity gain through biodiversity units. That is sort of the standard that we're working at the moment, which obviously wouldn't give a green bridge a huge amount of units because it's a linear structure and it's very small. It just goes over the carriageway. But there are talks in progress. I don't know how far along they currently are, but there is discussions on how to sort of quantify a green bridge and versus value for money, biodiversity, habitat reconnectivity, because we do understand that our strategic road network is a large contributor to habitat fragmentation, especially larger motorways. So rather than single lane carriageways, like when you've got 4 lanes of traffic either side, so 8 lanes in total, plus any infrastructure we have relating to that, it does fragment. We do recognise that, and we do, where possible, try and mitigate. I can't speak for the major project side of the company because I'm purely based in operations.
Yeah.
However, major projects are aware and are trying to incorporate more wildlife passes, underpasses, green bridges where possible.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. Did you want to come in, Tom?
Yeah, it wasn't on Heather's point. It was just going back to something about making sure the recovery strategy is included in early development. I think it could really do with, when it comes out being published, is just ensuring there's as much political will as possible behind it. Because I've seen, when we released the walking, wheeling and cycling strategy last year, there was a lot of fanfare, there was a lot of publication about it, and I've started to see that appear in business cases, how it aligns to the walking, wheeling and cycling strategy, how it aligns to this strategy. If other local authorities are developing business cases and they're thinking, we need to align with these major key strategies and points that we're publishing and we're promoting, that might mean that it gets a bit more than just a second look of like, right, what this needs to actually align to the local recovery strategy. And also, I think one of the areas I was reading through it, is ensuring that people who have access to nature, who don't typically have access to nature, and that could align with things like the Pride in Place initiative funding coming at the moment. So just sort of like just leeching onto as much as we can, getting it out there it's just part of it, because people will hear it and go, oh, that's just for, they'll think bat tunnels, they'll think of other stuff that's been in the news. But if you can get some political will and some active support behind it, maybe it just gives that second thought of, actually, I can make this business case more appealing to people by saying, I'm going to do this for a very popular strategy.
Yeah. And I suppose, I wonder, Tim, from your perspective, because you're working in a national park which probably has always had higher focus, I suppose, on nature. What are your reflections on how you embed that?
Thank you. If I could just, before that, on Heather's feedback on the national highways side of things, I was involved with the A57 Link Road scheme, and I know that they were putting quite a lot of measures in to try and improve biodiversity in and around the Mottram area, including trying to make sure that they gave a bat overfly area. There was lots of work being done to improve the biodiversity and habitats in the area. And they recently, I think towards the end of last year, I was in a meeting with consultants that are looking about linking habitats along the trunk road network, and we're specifically talking in our case about the A62A and the M62. And seeing how things could be done there. They got specific sites where they were looking at them, and kind of appreciate that will result in a report, and that may be some way off from actually delivering something. But yeah, there's positive noises being made. From our perspective, we do try, and certainly on our own properties, we do what we can to improve biodiversity. And one of the things that kind of I was reminded, I was actually out on the High Peak Trail on Sunday, and I don't know, well, you know, it runs from Cromford through to Hurdlow, and that and the Tissington Trail largely pass through what is best described as a green desert. It's kind of farmed areas that are for cattle largely, and the grassland is enriched. But the trail itself and the verges of it, it's like walking along an elongated meadow. There is so much biodiversity there, and it provides that link over so many miles. So many different species of butterflies around there, birds, lots of insects generally, lots of flowers. And it's a lot of the work that I've been doing there recently is on the active travel side. You start to see the value of these connections, particularly in places where you don't have the biodiversity surrounding area, being able to link those habitats up by the verges of trails, walking routes, cycling routes. It's impressive what you can see.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a couple of themes in there. One thing I suppose is quite interesting, Tom. So I'm one of the I'm independent chair of one of the Pride in Place programmes. So that's just getting going in Low Edges, Jordanthorpe and Batemore. And for how that would connect to this, it depends on how much the local community cares, really, because that's to deliver local community priorities. So I suppose there's a question back, isn't it? You know, how do we make it more of a priority for individuals? And some of that potentially, I think, links back to what you're saying, Tim, as well. You know, when you've got those trails and, you know, places people go that suddenly feel full of nature, then that can help. There's an interesting it's like a David Attenborough quote, and he was sort of saying it's not about, it's when did we stop loving nature as much, really, because every child that goes out into a field and looks at bugs tends to get very, very excited. It's almost like, how do we maintain it across our life cycles? In terms of partnerships and things that we need to build around delivery, who do you see as the key enablers, I suppose, of the strategy? Who really needs to work together to deliver this?
Just speaking from like I said before, like you said, with the private place to it's people, especially for what I'm thinking of urban environments and green nature and urban environments, it's to people. If people don't, like you said, if people don't care about nature and the environment, they're not going to be bothered about trying to get involved in things. And I suppose it's like you said, how do you make people realise that this area could be nicer if we made it greener? And it's only through time and just sort of just perseverance, I guess, just getting nature into places. Because there's plenty of places where you go and it feels like a green desert, a heat desert, and it would be so much nicer, but people don't understand. Me as well, I wouldn't understand until I've lived in both. You don't understand how much nicer it is with a bit of greenery and how stark it feels without it. So I suppose if you can get it into places, I don't know, to sort of, not by force, but by just encouragement. It's harder to lose nature and go, actually, that was really nice, I want that back, than it is to envision it. But I think for urban life, it's definitely just communities. It's people wanting to have that in their local area.
There was a really interesting project in the Netherlands. We were looking at there was a sort of a something for like to create a new national forest. There was a competition and South Yorkshire ended up second, which was a shame, but there's a new competition coming. But as part of that, we looked at a project called the Netherlands, which was a walking forest. So it was an architect and they just put loads of trees in planters and moved it around a city. So they demonstrated how different the city would be and would feel if you were suddenly immersed in it. And they've done other ones that I can't remember the name of it, but they've done it in quite a few squares and things around the country. It's really interesting, like how you change a place. Heather, you had your hand up before. Did you want to come in?
Yeah. Sorry, can you remind me of
The question. It's about
yeah.
partnership. Yeah, who do we need to have around the table?
Yes. So I think so landowners. So which is kind of, it's an obvious one to me. It is anyway. So I think a large part of some of the habitats are like within large areas of farmland. If you can get farmers on board with the strategy, maybe have some incentives. I know there is already the environment stewardship scheme through Natural England, and there is also some schemes, I believe, through the Environment Agency also for certain habitat improvement elements. But I think making like a really good sort of relationship with landowners in general would be the first step. But also regarding to sort of when the question, when did we stop loving nature? I think it's really important that as sort of generations get older, is to keep them engaged and excited about nature and inspired. I noticed myself growing up, a lot of kids same age as me sort of started to lose interest in nature around about age sort of secondary school age. I know that there's going to be a GCSE for, is it natural environment? I can't remember the full name of it.
Yeah, no, I've forgotten the name of it as well, but yeah,
something to do with natural studies, which I think is fantastic that that's coming out in the education system, and it needs to be rolled out in sort of every element in some way within all subjects. Really, there's an element of the natural environment in most subjects, even with physics, chemistry, maths, English. There's always some way to keep people engaged and inspired as they get older. I think sort of public engagement with schools, youth groups, and then the landowner side of things as well, developing a really good working relationship with them.
Yeah, and I suppose it's interesting that we're saying who's around the table, and as organisations we've almost put responsibility back to communities, and I suppose actually, in our roles as professionals and what we can do to make sure it would happen, I suppose as a kind of a final discussion point, what's the one thing that our organisation needs to put in place to move this strategy from a plan into something that's really happening? And it'd be great to hear from everybody before we wrap up the session. You're first on my screen, Claire. So, but Tim's put his hand up, so well, look at you. I'll come back to you, Tim.
Sorry about that. I guess from our perspective, our twin purposes kind of ties into all of this. So our first purpose is to conserve and enhance the wildlife, landscape and cultural heritage of the national park. So that's the thing that we have to do. We have same purpose as equal weight, which is to encourage opportunities for understanding and enjoyment by the public, which ties in. And both of them, we're told to do that by government. And they are equal unless there's a conflict, in which case we then go to the first purpose. So that kind of ties us into this in lots of ways, both the actual bringing forward improvements to biodiversity and to habitats through first purpose, but also enabling people to get out there and see nature and enjoy nature. So I think from our perspective, our purposes already tie us into the work that's going on.
Okay. Claire, I'm going to come back to you now.
I think for us as an organisation, we need to build this into our assurance framework in some way, so that as big investment decisions come through, it's a consideration that has to be gone through. So, for example, we might design a biodiversity or nature recovery supplementary form that has to go with a business case if it has the potential to either harm or the potential to enhance biodiversity in its area. And within that, we might include impact on trees or opportunity for SUDs, or just to make sure that just because we're doing transport, then we're actually thinking wider. And thinking around maintenance in terms of verges. On the verges, I'm a big fan of just leaving them alone.
Yeah.
I'm not actually a big fan of the wildflower meadows.
Yeah.
Because I think that's actually too interventionist and involves too much long-term maintenance and deployment of glyphosate and other such things, whereas actually just stop mowing it and it'll be and it'll do its job, and it costs a lot less.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a fair point. So Tom, coming to you.
I'm going to piggyback off a lot of what Claire said, being the same team and all. Yeah, a lot of ours is to do with making sure that we are at least weighing it heavier than we are currently, making sure that it's not just a box ticking exercise to have done your environmental impacts, or your just doing the bare minimum to checking that you're not causing any harm when you develop a business case, and to weigh it heavier in the list of priorities, and ensure that business cases do weigh it heavier when it's coming through our systems and assurance.
Yeah. Heather, did you want to come in?
I just want to echo what Claire said really about road verges. On a personal level, I think that this should be left alone where feasible and safe to do so. I think that some road verges are not necessarily within national highways, but in general, are cut far too often and don't need to be.
Yeah, there's an interesting with the wildlife. I've done a lot of work with Sheffield Rotherham Wildlife Trust over the years, and often, if you have intentional tree planting schemes, nature will actually overtake them.
Yes.
And it's quite interesting how little intervention you actually need. If you take a farming, like a field that's farmed, and just leave it on its own, it'll generally recover itself quite well for nature without too much intervention. So yeah, an affordable solution, I think. Abby, did you want to add a final thought?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. I've tried not to put them into this conversation too much, because I guess I have a few avenues, and I wanted to hear like what everyone else had to say. But I'd love to for us within Simca to think more about and like working with partners, how we can minimise the damage to nature from transport, as well as using transport to enhance nature, but also thinking about like water quality, road surface runoff into water courses, as well as wildlife mortality because of excessive speeds and things like that. And yeah, interesting to hear people's thoughts about verges, because I think my initial thought was, especially like in Rotherham, say, like those kinds of wildflower verges do a lot for public perception in terms of like people seeing those beautiful flowers and then thinking, oh, actually, like, it's helpful to kind of to bring people on board. But yeah, I understand maybe from like a broader perspective when it comes to maintenance and actual like local habitat value, like if those are the things that's growing there, then that's kind of what wants to grow there maybe. So yeah, so it's interesting to hear different thoughts on that.
So we've got, I suppose the final kind of plea is we've got till the end of July. If you haven't completed a survey yet, or if you know anybody who hasn't completed a survey yet, please do encourage them to fill in we've got a visual, we've got a general survey, and we've got a technical survey, depending on how much time and interest people have. We really want to spread the word that the local nature recovery strategy is nearly there and it is coming. For people who complete the questionnaire, you can sign up for further updates. You can also, you'll be put in the mix to win a £100 voucher as well. So if that interests you in any way, please use that in encouraging others to fill it in. But yeah, thank you so much for coming today and for bearing with the technical hitches. It's been really nice to meet you all. Okay.
You too, thanks.
All right.
So
See you later.
take care.
Thanks very much.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.